Hello and welcome to episode 61, 4 Essential Characteristics of a Remote Worker. Now, just so you know, my microphone's playing up today, so hopefully the sound isn't too sketchy. Just so you know, I also do this as a high quality podcast. So if the sound screws up on this episode, don't worry, just head over to the podcast at my website, stephanieholland.co/ actually this episode is /61. Okay, so welcome if you're new, and if you're not new and you're really enjoying the podcast so far, welcome back again, and please do me the massive favor of rating and reviewing on iTunes so that other people can find the show as well. Now also remember, if you want to fast track your remote career trajectory, head over to stephanieholland.co, where I offer personalized remote career plans and consults. Sign up for my list and I'll keep you up to date on what I'm offering. So last episode, we talked about the most important skill you need as a remote worker. So if you missed that, head back over to episode 60. So many people ask me what kind of skills they need as a remote worker. And well, you do need the job skills required by the role, like you would any traditional co-located role. And by the way, if you get confused about any of the terminology I'm using, like co-located, just head over to episode 57, where I school you up on the 6 or 7 most common terms in the remote workforce. Now, other than the one most important skill many remote companies agree on that is covered in the last episode, more important, I think, are your key characteristics that you bring to the role just for your own personal success and for your contribution to the company's mission. Now, characteristics are more like a quality trait or attribute that you possess, like being a good communicator or a self-starter. They are often just simply the way that you do things, a specific approach that you bring to your work, or the essence of how you work and really who you are, what you bring to the table that's unique. They're really what you bring to the quality of your work and the quality of your interactions with others. Now, your characteristics are really what will help you stand out from the crowd during the application process and during your trial probation period. So if you can infuse them into the application process, the ones that I'm going to talk about today, then you're more likely to be noticed up front, regardless of how many applications there are. And if you can bring them to your role and then the experience of you that your team will have of you, then you're also more likely to exceed in your role long term as well. Now, not only will you be appreciated by your team, it will have a ripple effect throughout your company on other people, projects, and processes. So many remote first companies are actively looking for signs of these characteristics in your application, even if they don't specify it in the job spec. So now you know. Now, while researching for this episode, because I don't want to just share my opinion with you, but really surface the relevant research and data that's been discovered, I found a great research study referenced through a Forbes article. Now, both links are in the show notes, but they endeavored to answer the question, what competencies are necessary for success as a remote worker? And the answers were pretty interesting. Now, back in episode 54, I covered the ideal traits of a remote worker: a knowledge worker, highly skilled, passionate about your career, really good at what you do, a strong work ethic, and highly organized. But this research that I'm going to talk about today also suggested a few more interesting that are critical hiring criteria for companies to help them build a workforce that is more capable of self-management. And of course, for remote and distributed teams, a self-management team or a self-managing team is a holy grail, and far different from the micromanaging tendencies that saturate the traditional 9 to 5. Now, it was a broad study. Respondents cited Canada and US as well as European countries. 7% of respondents identified home as being Mexico, Russia, Romania, Bolivia, and New Zealand, and Poland. The age range, the bulk was 36 to 40, but also were included were 25 to 35 and 41 to 45. And it was across a variety of working arrangements, which we talked about in episodes 56, and across a variety of roles within any business. Now, there are some obvious characteristics that make you awesome in any job, whether remote or co-located. So communication, being self-directed and motivated, disciplined, and adaptable and flexible. Awesome. If you're all of those things, great. But there are 4 more that I really want to draw your attention to, because when I read this research, I was nodding vigorously. Now, these qualities have helped me a lot in my life in general, and of course in my work, and personally just help me grow professionally and personally. And surprisingly, there are very few people that have these qualities in the remote companies I've worked with. Now, you should totally read the whole study yourself, but here they are. The first one is trustworthy. Now, being trustworthy was stated as critical by 72% of the respondents. They reported that if someone is not trustworthy, it might be a struggle to make progress in his or her career. Discussions reflected on the thought that some people need the accountability of others to continue making progress. Now, the weather, the surf, depression, excitement are some of the distractions that can cause misplaced priorities when an individual has already committed to an important deliverable. But by consistently following through with what is being committed to, an individual is demonstrating trustworthiness. Now, for people who view commitment as restrictive, it doesn't mean they're not trustworthy, but it does mean that it will be difficult to demonstrate through actions. Now, so do you consider yourself trustworthy? When I was researching for the podcast, one person said in the Facebook group, "I'm not sure I would trust myself to do the work." Well, you are probably not an ideal remote worker. The second ideal characteristic is being able to take initiative and being curious. Now, this refers to an act or strategy intended to resolve a difficulty or improve a solution, and it's when you're eager to know or learn something. So the phrase "the buck stops here" really rang true with many research participants. When working remotely, the individual may not have ready access to a manager or co-worker to solve a problem or provide a resource. In all likelihood, no one will be standing over a remote worker telling them the next steps, or even the first steps in initiating working through a project. There's no micromanager to focus on the details. At least, hopefully, there isn't. Now, being curious speaks to a desire for continued growth, never settling for status quo, seeking new and improved processes, new solutions, learning new things, and never letting oneself stagnate. This desire for continued learning was a common sentiment amongst participants. So again, you should totally read the whole thing yourself, but you've got to remember your manager or CEO might be asleep when you're working. So confidently being able to make decisions and following through with those decisions, and presenting your rationale and your executive decision making for them, about how to proceed when you have an element of uncertainty, is a really useful superpower. Now, this is my favorite. This is the third characteristic: high self-efficacy. Now, this speaks to having a belief in your own capabilities to produce quality outcomes. So healthy self-efficacy regarding your ability to produce a product or service that is of highest quality provides a profile of an individual who has what it takes to be successful in a smart working context, okay? So this has nothing to do with perfectionism. This has to do with being able to deliver high quality work on time, drama-free. Now, the fourth competency is accountability. This, without exception, says the research study, is vital. If one is to enjoy the privileges afforded by freedom, independence, and flexibility, there must be accountability. While many what does it say here in the research? While many anecdotal responses were provided, one that reflects the sentiments of all would be doing what I say I will do, delivering on commitments, making work visible and available to the rest of the team, and holding the rest of the team to their commitments as well. So the one word used by most responses was responsibility. Being responsible for meeting deadlines, fulfilling commitments, owning your consequences, the consequences of your actions and decisions, and achieving deliverables. Success and failure is all on you. So doing what you say you'll do is the most rare trait of all, and then taking responsibility for the results and consequences of what you do and the decisions of that, super important. So accountability, super important. Now, if you do this and you have evidence for the fact that you're capable of doing this, then you are going to be, I guarantee, in the top 2% of applicants and candidates. So, do you think that you are naturally trustworthy? Do you show initiative and curiosity? Do you have high self-efficacy? And are you accountable? Yes or no, you know either way that I have an awesome worksheet so that you can workshop the best examples of these competencies, right? You have them even if you don't think you do, and you have a ton of evidence for it, I promise you. And the worksheet is going to draw this out. And then you can pepper them throughout your application process, throughout your cover letters, your CV, and your conversations as well. Naturally, at least, naturally and effortlessly. So head over to worksheet 9 in the podcast pack and you'll be able to do that really quickly. No drama, no procrastination, just do it. Now, if you don't have the worksheet yet, don't worry. You can grab a copy of the podcast pack containing all of the worksheets for every single episode at stephanieholland.co/61. That's it from me this week on Thriving Empire Podcast. Until next week and the next episode, keep living on your own terms so that you can build your career and the life you really want simultaneously. I'll see you next week. Bye.